I started the Alliance for Inclusive Education 30 years ago now. At the time, I was a parent of a disabled child who was 4, who was coming up to school age. Having been educated myself for 14 years at home on the sofa, and then for 3 years in a special boarding school, which brought great problems to me when I left. I was so determined as a mother that my daughter wasn't going to follow the same path as me, and ever feel excluded from her local community. I felt she deserved to have all the same opportunities as any other child, possibly even more, because she would have limited choices because of her impairments. I went to an organisation called the Parents Campaign for Integrated Education, which is what it was called at that time, for help, for support for myself. Having never been in a mainstream school in my life, I knew I could do with some allies, which they were. So my primary motivation was to make sure my daughter got the support she needed, and I did, in order to pioneer inclusive education for children with more severe impairments than were currently catered for within mainstream schools. When I went to the parents' organisation, I learned a tremendous amount about the fact that all children, whether they have physical impairments, learning difficulties, behaviour issues, or were ill, they all needed the same things. They all needed friendship. They needed to feel they belong. They needed to learn about the world, the real world, and how it works, their place in it, and to be given the tools that everybody else is to be able to read, write, do what they can to make their way in the world. So I expanded my view, partly because of the parents I met, many of whom were parents of children with Down syndrome, which was not a group I'd met before. So that made me really think about realizing this was a bigger problem than just getting a ramp into the school corridor or a toilet. It was big. It was much bigger than that. At the time, the 1981 Education Act had made provision for children with special educational needs, as they put it, to have extra support in mainstream school if their parents were crazy enough to want them to have it, But it wasn't happening. In practice, it was barely happening. When parents met disabled people like me and others who had been segregated as children, it gave them tremendous strength and courage to carry on fighting, because it was like we were their children growing up, and we could say, yeah, you're on the right path here, you're doing the right thing, and gave them lots of information. I also had been working in disability equality training in many other areas prior to becoming a parent. And when I went into school, I realized those teachers had never heard of any of the work that we were doing. They didn't know about the social model. They didn't know about disabled people's own organisations. And that all that training needed to be done inside the education system if we were to truly change it. So I could see there was an enormous amount of work to be done, and that the combination of parents and disabled people were very powerful unified voice. And then teachers joined, a few professionals that were radically minded. Interestingly, quite a few from special school who realised its shortcomings and really wanted to support the inclusion of their children in mainstream school. It was a long fight because there was tremendous resistance and fear, both from the mainstream schools who were nervous, felt they were unprepared, unqualified, but also from the special school sector who thought their days would be numbered if we were successful. And they had a very big vested interest in carrying on selling their product, as it were. It was, we were an unfunded organisation when we began. It started on my kitchen table, as these things do, with about 6 months halfpenny. You know, I drew the first letterhead myself. And then we moved to the Royal Festival Hall Cafe and had all our meetings there as we grew bigger. Finally, the Platinum Trust sorted us out and gave us our first proper grant, which I think was £3,000. And it's been a long old battle, is all I can say. Although, given where we started, we've been incredibly successful in the sense that the concept of inclusion has taken off in the world, not just within school, but the realization that we do better together and that diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing, and that we need to make friends. We need contact with each other to recognize our common humanity. I think those ideas have taken off amazingly because of the very visible struggles that we put up. But they're also amazingly challenging to an education system which is increasingly competitive, narrow, of course, aimed at employment, in a world where only certain people look like they're going to get jobs. It's introducing the market into schools, setting schools against each other, publishing league tables, judging them on their exam results, all those things. They've got worse during the time we've been doing this. And so there was a point, I think, when David Cameron in particular made this pledge to get elected to reverse the bias towards inclusion. As if we had one. That really to me said this is a big threat. You can't, if you win this, you'll change the whole ethos of school. You will shift things, in a very radical way. Which of course we would if we were to truly have an inclusive education system or any other sort of system. We would be looking at a different value system, really, putting people before profit and all those things which are now people are beginning to understand we need to do for everybody's good. So the resistance has been bigger than I ever thought it would, despite the fact that we have many successes, many children who've been through mainstream and come out and lived such a bigger life than they would have done. Have they not? My daughter being one of them. So I've seen it with my own eyes. And I think it's changing the world outside of school and outside of the UK more than it is changing what's happening inside school still. So the battle goes on. And I'm thrilled, I can't tell you how thrilled I am, that the Alliance still exists and our voice is still being heard, because nobody else will be saying it. Nobody else will be doing what we're doing. And something tells me for us to, for such a small organisation to exist flying in the face of everything that's happening for 30 years means somewhere people want us to succeed. We've always found allies, both financial allies and all kinds of others. So in a way that fills me with hope. I'm also full of anger at how long and hard the struggle it's been. And I've learned a great deal about what happens to children, not just disabled children, but children in general within the current education system. So I feel the work's massively important for everyone as well. So, wow. And a lot of those children now, you know, are fighting alongside us. They've grown up, they've picked up their, well, they know how to live, they know how to be with people. They've learned the lingo, you know, they're streetwise in a way. You and I, many disabled people have been segregated all our childhoods. Are not, and maybe never will. But, you know, the army is growing, if you like. Yeah. Here's to the next 30 years. Congratulations to everyone that's kept this fight going. You know, I think we probably have no idea of the influence we've had and will have. Yeah. Okay.